morning and welcome to Education Views today. My name is Mac James and I'm your podcast host. On the program this morning I have Abbey Magee, second year pre-service teacher from Central Queensland University, here with us to discuss the topics of civics and citizenship. We have touched on civics and citizenship within the Australian curriculum a bit this week, but we decided to bring Miss Magee in to respond. Our question for her is, what is the best way to teach civics and citizenships in primary schools in an effort to achieve the Alice Springs Declaration goal that all Australian students should be active and informed members of their local and global community?
Hello, Mac, and thank you for having me. Well, essentially, this question is addressing the need for primary school-aged children to feel like they take a part in their local and global community as active and informed citizens. So first of all, what does an active informed citizen actually look like? Within the Melbourne Declaration on Educational Goals for Young Australians, it states that an active and informed citizen encompasses the following traits: acts with moral and ethical integrity, appreciates Australia's social, cultural, linguistic and religious diversity, understands of Australia's system of government, history and culture, acknowledge and value Indigenous cultures, work for the common good, be committed to national values of democracy, equity and justice, and be a responsible global and local citizen. The Alice Springs Declaration states two goals. Goal 1 states that the Australian education system should promote excellence and equity, while Goal 2 addresses that all young Australians become confident and creative individuals, successful lifelong learners and active and informed members of the community. So in order to teach these ethics and values, there needs to be a deeper understanding of what civics and citizen education actually looks like, or CCE for short. We need to discuss what it looked like past, present and future while addressing how CCE education can be taught, keeping in mind marginalised groups and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Civics and citizenship education is taught from years 3 to 10 within the Australian curriculum. The civics and citizenship curriculum for primary students is embedded within HASS, which is Humanities and Social Sciences, and aims to develop understanding around democracy, laws, citizens and citizenship, diversity and identity. I firmly believe that with the correct implementation and appropriate teaching methods, CCE curriculum has the potential to shape a young child's life, teaching them valuable skills to grow up with and pass on to the wider local and global community.
Can you tell us, Abbey, a bit about what civics and citizenship education looked like in the past?
Within Australia, there's been multiple attempts embedding it within teaching practices, and each time it's sort of always missed the mark. So Australia first saw civics and citizenship education implemented in the Hobart Declaration of Schooling in 1989. However, the real movement towards civics and citizenship education was due to Prime Minister Paul Keating, who at the time, this being the late 1980s, had extremely strong views about putting civics on the educational agenda of the nation. Under the Keating government, the Civics Expert Group, CEG, were appointed to research previous school-based CCE programs. Research found many failed to meet their objectives and lacked teaching skills to create active citizens. Therefore, $25 million was actually pledged to make the recommendations of the Civic Expert Group. Unfortunately, in 1996, the federal election and change in government saw a freeze in that process. It wasn't until the Education Minister, Dr. Kemp, released Discovering Democracy in 1996. Discovering Democracy was a program created with the intention to promote more engaged citizens within Australian schooling population. This national initiative saw all states embracing civics education and finding a place for it within their curriculum. However, due to disruptions between its conception and delivery, the program had good intentions and proper funding, but it lacked the ability to produce successful outcomes. According to Kennedy in 1997, Discovering Democracy failed to identify the things that matter to young people, the things that can help them understand their reality and give them a stake in the future that rightfully belongs to them. So, where do we go from there? It was between 2008 and 2010 that the Australian government placed emphasis on the national curriculum, playing a key role in delivering quality education to young Australians. The Melbourne Declaration on Educational Goals for Young Australians was published in 2008, and placed importance once again on the young Australians being active and informed citizens. Following that, the Australian curriculum began to roll out with English, mathematics, science and history first, followed by learning areas like art, geography and civics and citizenship. Finally, in regards to what we're discussing today is the Alice Springs Declaration. which was introduced in December 2019, and builds upon past declarations signed by Hobart, Adelaide and Melbourne, which have guided their journey over the 3 decades. The declaration once again places prominence on students becoming active and informed members of the community.
Wow, that sure is a long and detailed history of civics and citizenship in Australia. Do you think that we have finally created a curriculum that reflects this declaration?
The Australian curriculum places emphasis on teaching about democracy in Australia and educating students on the country's parliamentary process. Additionally, there's a large focus on the values of Australia's democracy based on the rights and freedoms of individuals within our country. Freedom of speech, voting, social justice and equity are all addressed within the CCE curriculum. Additionally, the curriculum gives teachers a variety of options for teaching in a wide range of contexts, with several options to adopt a whole school approach into their CCE teaching. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, as well as Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, are 2 cross-curriculum priorities within the Australian curriculum. Whilst the CCE incorporates these well, it fails to teach and explore other countries and cultures. In order to be a global citizen, students must learn and acknowledge other countries and histories and cultures. The Australian curriculum recognises the complexity of 21st century citizenship, however, it under-acknowledges wider school contexts. According to Heggart, Avramkis and Matthews, the curriculum overlooks diverse citizenship cultures and fails to recognise student agency in the becoming an active citizen process.
Very interesting. How and where does Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students fit into this, and even marginalised members of our community?
I'm glad you brought that up, actually. Personally, when you look into the curriculum, I don't believe there's enough content catering for marginalised groups within our communities. We see it does address Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, which is absolutely so vital in CCE. However, there is that lack of support for marginalised cultural minorities. Hence, why I believe it's extremely important for teachers that they do not push personal or dominant cultural ideas onto students and teach it in a way that is democratic and respectful of all cultural backgrounds. Australia's had a really dark past. 2 centuries of dispossession, injustice, suffering and survival. Indigenous Australians today are still not recognised as the original people of Australia, due to a legal doctrine called terra nullius, which means empty land. On the 26th of January 1788, Captain Cook invaded Australia. It was on that day he claimed that there was no civilization on the land, a day that we now celebrate as Australia Day. Instances and events like this show the poor respect for culture Australia has, and has had for so many generations. As teachers and educators, we have an inherent responsibility to talk about the past, to discuss the intergenerational trauma that's been passed down. Immediately, once white people discovered Australia, Indigenous Australians were treated as if they did not exist. The idea was what they would die out, a phrase commonly called to smooth the dying pillow, where the Indigenous were sent off to effectively disappear. The policy known as assimilation policy in the 1930s saw kids sent away to learn to live like white people. This was followed by the integration policy in the 1960s. It wasn't until the 1967 referendum that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were counted as humans and given the right to vote. Australia nowadays is a very multicultural nation. However, it's important to remember Australia has not always been accepting of other cultures. Within civics and citizenship education, the teaching of shared history is highlighted, although we must teach it showing a deeper understanding and acceptance of our shared history and cultures.
Wow, when you lay it all out like that, it is very chilling to know what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people lived through. So, in summary, Abby, can you tell us the best way you believe civics and citizenship should be taught in Australia?
Civics and citizenship education definitely has the ability to produce active and informed citizens. However, in order to do so, we as educators definitely need to teach it in a way that is 1, relevant, and 2, informing. CCE teaching has the opportunity to empower students, give them a voice and teach them to express opinions. Allowing students to be active decision makers, both in the classroom and in the whole school community, is the most important part of creating an active citizen once they leave school. Leadbeater 2017 states in order to reach the Alice Springs Declaration, teachers must make students develop deeper experiences, serve the community and work with others within authentic learning environments. Educators have so many opportunities to provide rich CCE teaching within their classroom environment, For example, giving students the opportunity to get involved in class discussions and in-class voting, or broader whole school participation, like creating school councils and collaborating as a school to participate in events like Clean Up Australia Day. I strongly believe that the areas in the Australian curriculum that lack depth can be made up for in an inclusive and active classroom setting. Ensuring we transform our students from a citizen that is minimal and only does what needs to be done, to an active citizen who then takes action beyond that, and even further to a transformative citizen who portrays values and moral principles beyond any other citizen.
Abbey, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your insight into this area is beyond interesting, and thank you for sharing your passion for teaching as well. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to jump on our Facebook page. We'll be back next week. Thanks again.